Ferrari's 2025 season so far has basically been a live podcast of what not to say on the radio. Like if you thought their old school chaos peaked years ago, welcome to the sequel nobody asked for but somehow got funded with a bigger budget. We've had race engineers fumbling like they're guessing answers on a quiz show, and the drivers, yeah, they're just out there trying not to lose their minds lap after lap. Let's rewind a bit. In Australia, Charles gave us that iconic must be the water moment, which sounded less like a radio call. Then in Monaco, it was Lewis Hamilton's turn to get ghosted by his race engineer, like literally no response mid-race. Man was out there solo queuing his entire strategy. Flash forward to Austria, and Ferrari did what they do best, ignored driver input completely. Lewis told them the tyres were holding up fine and he wanted to stretch the stint, but nope, they boxed him anyway, and from podium potential to locked in P4. The guy's a 7-time world champion, but sure. And now here we are at the British Grand Prix, and guess what? Ferrari radio is back on its nonsense. Wrong calls, questionable pit windows, total lack of coordination, plus the car performance just dipped into mediocrity, like it was trying to avoid attention. But spoiler alert, everyone noticed. Let's break this all down. How bad was it this time? Is it just miscommunication, or are we watching another slow magma Ferrari meltdown unfold in real time? Buckle up, because this isn't just a meme review. This is a case study in how not to manage two world-class drivers at one of the biggest teams in F1. So, Charles Leclerc, yeah, this weekend was basically the racing equivalent of trying to microwave soup in a metal bowl. Nothing exploded exactly, but something definitely fell off the entire time. Going into Silverstone, Charles looked like he had hope. Maybe not win the race kind of hope, but at least don't end up completely cooked kind of hope. But no, from the moment qualifying wrapped, you could just feel the energy drop. He landed P6 behind Lewis in P5, and his radio afterwards honestly sounded like a man slowly realizing that this car might be fighting him more than his opponents are. Then race day arrived, and Ferrari said, you know what would spice this up? A formation lap pit stop. So Charles was one of the very few who immediately boxed for slicks before the lights even went out. Now, to be fair, this isn't totally insane. We've seen it work in the past. And sometimes it's the Hail Mary move that puts you on the podium. Except here, it backfired so hard, it practically launched him into the shadow realm. The track was still slippery, the temps were ice cold, and Charles just never got into a rhythm. It's like he was driving a shopping cart in the middle of a slip and slide. Then came the weather roulette, light drizzle, then more rain, then enough dry lines to think about switching back to slicks. And through all of it, Charles was just existing, not moving forward, not defending hard, just there. By the time the race was winding down, he'd spun off at Maga to Beckett, just to put the icing on an already tragic cake. Post-race, the guy looked and sounded like he'd just gone through 5 stages of grief, all during the cool-down lap. He called it maybe the most difficult race of his career. Not in terms of results necessarily, because we've seen him finish worse, but just in terms of how much he had to fight the car to even keep it pointed forward. And when a driver of Charles's caliber, who let's not forget, carried Ferrari for half of 2022, says he couldn't keep the car on track, that's not just frustration talking. That's a driver completely disconnected from his machinery. He did mention something about the setup being extreme, which sounds like Ferrari tried to go full mad scientist again. Maybe a low downforce gamble, maybe something on the ride height. But when the only real outcome is your driver spiraling around corners like he's driving on dish soap, maybe it's time to dial things back. And just to rub salt in the wound, on the other side of the garage, Lewis Hamilton casually finished P4, narrowly missing out on the podium. So in the same car, same weekend, same conditions, same engineers, Lewis was battling near the front while Charles was auditioning for ice dancing. That's not just bad luck, that's something broken in the setup, the feedback loop, or maybe even in Ferrari's ability to consistently deliver two raceable cars. Charles didn't even sound angry in the interviews, he sounded tired. And you know it's bad when Leclerc stops yelling and just sighs instead. When the guy who once screamed, "What are you doing?" over team radio starts sounding like he's reading sad poetry about tire temps, something's seriously off. So what's next for Charles? According to him, it's about resetting and understanding what went wrong. And yeah, let's be honest, he's not wrong. Because if Ferrari can't give him a car that functions at even 70% of what he needs, it doesn't matter if he's the second coming of Schumacher, he's going to be stuck fighting the backmarkers while everyone else chases trophies. So let's talk about Lewis Hamilton, the man, the myth, the 7-time world champ who rolled up to his home race in a Ferrari and had half the crowd in red. Now, coming into the British Grand Prix, Lewis wasn't exactly expecting to dominate. Let's be real, the SF25 isn't the smoothest thing in mixed conditions, but the man still had hope. He lined up P5 on the grid, and with the weather being as British as ever, there was always the chance for chaos to do its magic. And to be fair, Lewis delivered a pretty strong opening phase of the race. There was confidence in the way he carved up positions and stayed within reach of the podium runners, and for a good chunk of the race it really looked like he might squeeze out a cheeky P3. The Ferrari once again showed that it only knows two extremes. Either it wants to be a Red Bull or it wants to be a brick with blinkers. There's no in between. And for Lewis, it was absolutely the brick phase. His second stint on Inters was where it started to go downhill. The grip just disappeared, like Ferrari's championship hopes after Australia. The left front started crying, understeer kicked in, and suddenly the 7-time world champ was muscling a car that didn't want to turn through corners it used to dance through. Lewis even said it bluntly post-race, this car in those conditions was just a pain to drive. And honestly, hearing him say that hits different. When Lewis Hamilton, who's driven some of the worst and best cars in F1 history, says this one is hard to handle in the wet, then you know it's not just a bad balance issue, it's a full-blown handling nightmare. But let's not pretend this is fine. This is now back-to-back races where Ferrari's car balance has been miles off in wet or changeable conditions. Leclerc struggled to stay on track, and Lewis, despite being an actual god in the rain, still couldn't find grip or bite in a car that clearly hates low-speed corners and eats front tires for breakfast. So yeah, Lewis is still carrying himself like the pro he is, but deep down, you can tell he knows this car's a long way off being podium material in anything other than ideal conditions. And Ferrari better figure this out fast, because we've still got Spa, Zandvoort, and potentially a few more wet weekends coming, and if this is how the car behaves when things get slippery, they're in trouble. So yeah, another British Grand Prix in the books, and honestly, what a weekend it was. Rain, chaos, underdogs on the podium, Ferrari strategies that make your head hurt. The full F1 bingo card basically got checked off. It was emotional, it was frustrating, it was beautiful and ridiculous all at once, and if that isn't the essence of this sport, I don't know what is. Ferrari clearly have a lot of homework to do, not just on car performance, but also on communication, tire calls, and maybe just listening to their drivers before sending them into tactical purgatory. Leclerc looked like he was driving with a blindfold at times. Hamilton was fighting a car that handles like a shopping trolley in the rain, and meanwhile, teams like Sauber are out here casually sneaking podiums like it's no big deal. But that's Formula One, right? The peaks are high, the lows are brutal, and if you're not ready to get emotionally whiplashed within 90 minutes, you're in the wrong sport. All I know is that as much as we roast Ferrari, and as painful as it is to watch the red cars fumble, there's still something poetic about the drama. It keeps us hooked, keeps us yelling at our screens, and keeps F1 alive. And now we move on to one of my all-time favorite tracks, Spa-Francorchamps, the roller coaster through the Ardennes. Eau Rouge, unpredictable weather, and the kind of racing that separates the brave from the bold. If Ferrari thought Silverstone was tough, Spa is basically their final boss battle. So buckle up, it's only going to get spicier from here.